Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of He's Not Wrong. I'm your host, Chad D. I have to start out right off the bat saying if you're listening to this on any of the platforms, I am having to use my little iPhone handheld mic, partly because when I recorded this intro the first time, I did not know that there was an horrible, horrifying, god awful vocal effect on my soundboard turned on. I had no way of knowing beforehand. I now understand why people wear their headphones when they're recording. I can't stand listening to myself speak, but it might be something that I have to do in the future because this is now the third time that this has happened to me, which is why this episode is delayed. So I'm kind of making do with what I have. Apologies to those watching. I'm having to film this intro on my iPhone, not my big main podcast camera. But it goes without being said, I hope you stick through this and you wait for my conversation with today's guest. This episode was filmed a while ago, but it was specifically made for Pride Month. My guest is someone who has spent their entire career refusing to let the world look away when our representation mattered the most. My guest is a drag artist, a political organizer, and a Guinness World Record holder, a two-time GLAAD nominee, an Out 100 honoree, a former New York City Pride Grand Marshal. My guest is none other than the one and only Marti Cummings. Marti has performed on all 7 continents. They have sold out Joe's Pub in the Lincoln Center. They have ran for office as the first openly non-binary candidate in New York City history. They've moderated a panel at the United Nations, and that's just to name a few of their accomplishments. They, to me, are one of the most important queer voices in America, and there is genuinely no one that I would rather have join me as we do our first Pride Month episode. Today's conversation is one that I've been wanting to have for a long time because we're going to dig into the LGBTQ history. We talk about the threats facing our community right now, and we make the case for why understanding where we came from is so important. I'm calling out gay Republicans with this episode. So this one is for you. So if you've ever heard any gay person say that the government isn't coming for us, or if you've heard a gay person say that they've voted for a Republican, then I want you to just go ahead and share this episode with them because, like I said, it's dedicated to gay Republicans because they need to learn their history. So without further ado, I give you the one and only Marti Cummings. Marti Cummings, welcome to He's Not Wrong. Thank you so much for coming on today. Happy Pride. How are you?
Oh, Pride, it's here. It is here. And what a time. We need to be celebrating queer joy, but also being visible and having our voices heard. And, I'm a big believer that Pride is a riot, and I think we need to fire it up, get loud, right?
Pride is a protest and it is a celebration. And one thing that we're going to get into in a little bit is how do you balance the two of those? But before we get into that part of the conversation, I do want to say I absolutely love New York. My boyfriend lived there for a few years, so I spend my time between Alabama and New York. I spent Pride
You're in
2020.
Alabama?
Yeah, I'm in Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is like so off topic, but
Sure.
one of my favorite places to perform is in Mobile,
Yeah.
Alabama. I've performed there many, many times, and some of the greatest audiences I've ever had.
I mean, the drag scene in Alabama has really popped off in recent years. And I know it's been strong for a while, but I'm so happy that they're finally getting the recognition that they deserve. In Birmingham, I know the drag scene in Mobile is getting a lot of attention that they deserve. RuPaul had a queen from my hometown in Montgomery that was on last season. And then you had Sam Starr, who is from Birmingham. Sam performs at Al's on 7th, which is about 2 blocks behind my apartment. Not to dox myself to my audience, but I'm just so happy that Alabama is getting the recognition that it deserves when it comes to drag.
Yeah.
Yes. So as I was saying, I split my time between here and New York for a little bit, and I fell in love with the bar scene up there. My favorite bar in all of New York is Club Cumming, and I have to ask, any relation?
No relation, but I do love Club Cumming, and I love Daphne Always, who performs there and is now on the Club Cumming show on Wow Presents. And, I've known Alan for years, and also Alan is one of my favorite kitchens. That's like so random, but I love his kitchen. It's like this rich. It's beautiful. Anyway, Club Coming is a lot of fun. I've performed there many times. It's a lot of fun.
I mean, I fell in love with that bar the first time I went in. It was like so perfect, so quaint and intimate and dark. Uh, I mean, I just fell in love with it. And then I saw that you were performing. Are you still doing shows at Joe's Pub?
I just did a show at Joe's Pub recently. It was my Are You There? Astrid, It's Me, Marti show that I did in Palm Springs and in Colorado and a couple other places. It was a lot of fun. I love Joe's Pub. You know, like one of my like one of the people who inspires me the most, Justin Vivian Bond, performs there all the time, and Barla Jean Merman's about to perform there, and she's such an icon. And Bridget Everett, of course, and Murray Hill, they all do shows there. And I find Joe's Pub to be one of the it's the public theater, so it just feels different, you know, when you get
Yeah,
to perform there. And when I do it, it's with my band, and there's nothing better than singing with a rock band.
I love that. I fell in love with Joe's Pub a few summers back. I saw Kat Cohen. She was performing at Joe's
Oh,
Pub, and my boyfriend is obsessed with her. He took me to her show there, and so just all these little places in New York, I just fell in love with. And then you had little connections to them, so I got really excited when you're coming on the podcast to talk to you about
yeah,
this.
Kat Cohen just did my show, Stage Fright at Red Eye recently. Well, recently, it was like 6 months ago at this point, but uh, she's great. She's very funny. I love like weird, kooky, funny, and she was a really great guest. You know, like it's always fun when you have another comedian on stage with you. We have two very different comedic styles, and so
Yeah,
when I was interviewing her during the show, it was really fun to kind of blend. Our different styles of comedy together. Uh, but I love her and how much she loves and supports drag and
yeah.
local drag. She's always having drag artists, perform with her and be a part of her shows and her bits. And I love that allyship and support that she shows.
Next time you do a show with her, if you do, and I hope you do, you have to let me know so I can make a quick trip up to New York and see it.
I will. She's great.
So I just want to read a few accomplishments about you that I left out in the intro on purpose.
Oh
So
boy.
you were the New York City Pride Grand Marshal in 2025. You hold a Guinness World Record. You were an Out 100 honoree. You were a two-time GLAAD nominee, World of Wonder Wowie Award winner, GLAM Entertainer of the Year. The list goes on. So my question for you is, what can't you do?
Oh God. I what can I do?
I feel like that's easier to answer than keep going on with what
I'm
you
not a
can
good
do.
dancer. I'm not a good dancer. I'll say that. I'm a terrible dancer. I'm not a good dancer.
You can that's a skill that you can learn.
Oh, sure, sure, sure. I'm trying.
So
Not good at that.
I want to hit on the fact that you were the Pride Grand Marshal in 2025 for New York City Pride because like I said earlier in the conversation that you brought up, Pride's a protest, but it's also time for celebration. And I feel like you are in a really unique position with your advocacy work, with everything that you've done in New York City to be able to talk about how you hold that celebration but that protest in the same space.
Yeah, it was probably one of the greatest days of my life in drag. It was so special, and to follow in the footsteps of people like Miss Major and
Mhm.
Raquel Willis, and to be there with people who I admire so much, like Lena Bradford and Elisa Crespo, who Elisa and I, ran for city council around the same time, and she now
Mhm.
is the head of the Stonewall Foundation. And Lena Bradford is a legend in the nightlife community and the advocacy community, and somebody that I feel privileged to be friends with, and it just was one of those things where I couldn't believe that it was happening. I was extremely honored, and so balancing the joy along with the resistance, it is a balancing act because I made it a point. There was two things I made a point of when I went into it. One being I was going to have as much fun as humanly possible, and I was going to soak in every single minute of the day because it is something that will never happen again. I will
Yeah.
never be the Grand Marshal of New York City Pride again, you know? And it happened to be on my 20th Pride. The first time I went to Pride was
Mm.
when I was 17, 20 years ago at the time. And I had only lived in New York for, I moved to New York when I was 17 on June 23rd. And so Pride was that weekend. And it was my very first Pride. And so on the 20th anniversary of that, to be the Grand Marshal was really emotional and like overwhelming in the best way. And so I made it a point. These 2 points was one, I was going to have as much fun as I possibly could, and
Yep.
I was going to use that opportunity to speak about issues that I think are important. And so Pride said to me, they were like, once you have that microphone, you can do whatever you want, you know? And I was like, well, I'm about to. When I was in the parade, I made it a point. They were so funny. They were like, the grand marshals are at the front, so they kind of set the speed of
Yeah.
the route. They said, so just like stay in your car and wave, whatever. But I was like, no, if I see like a little kid, I want them to feel seen. And so I kept jumping out of my car every time I saw like little kids with their flags or whatever, because I wanted to make sure they got a picture and a high five and all that. I just didn't realize there were gonna be so many kids. I kept getting out of the car. So I think I slowed the parade down. But then, we had the press conference that morning and then an opportunity to do a speech later that afternoon. And during the press conference, there was a lot of press there, and I called to their faces out. I let them know, like, you have an obligation to tell the truth. And in the
Hmm.
administration that we're in, a lot of the leaders of these news organizations are capitulating to fascism. And I told them, like, it's great you're here covering Pride, but you have an obligation to tell the stories of trans people, to tell the stories of how their healthcare is being cut, to tell the stories of trans people who are being murdered and discriminated against. And you have an obligation to speak out against it because journalism is telling the truth, not bending to fascism. And then when I was giving my speech, I really wanted to hit on the intersectionality of what's going on, um, how ICE is targeting and kidnapping our immigrant communities, and trans people are under attack, and our trans kids are under attack, and Black and brown voters are being discriminated against, and the intersectionality of all of that,
Yeah.
and I was really proud to have been given that platform to speak about those things. And, it's only escalated since then in the last year. Things
Yeah.
have escalated so much. I mean, look, the Supreme Court just last week, eliminating Black districts, which is.
Listen, I live in one of the districts that they're invalid. So I vote on Tuesday, and I'll have to vote again in August because they're invalidating all of our votes in this congressional district. It's one of four in the state of Alabama that's going to have to re-vote after we've already voiced our votes. So it's absolutely insane. I'm at the epicenter of that battle right now, and there's actually a big rally in Montgomery. I know we already said it's June 1st is Pride. Actually, plot twist, we're filming this like a week before, but this weekend there's a big rally in Montgomery, Alabama to fight back against the legislation that they're pushing forward to silence the Black community in places in the South. It's just absolutely insane what's going on right now.
Yeah, and to be in Montgomery doing that, where the civil rights movement was so pivotal in getting the Voting Rights Act and working towards equality. And I watched this really great video recently of Joy Reid, who I really love, and I really admire what she has done since leaving her show
Yeah.
and her advocacy. And she was doing an interview with Jennifer Welsh, not Rachel Welch, sorry, Jennifer Welch. She's great. And Joy Reid was doing an interview with her, and she said something really, really important that kind of like, was like a light bulb, like, oh, this is a perspective I didn't think about in this. And she said that this MAGA movement, this white supremacist, uh, uh, you know, the white supremacy that is now just out in the open. Um, you know, MAGA has given these bigots permission to just say what they've been thinking, you know. But what it is in terms of like this legislation of the Supreme Court and whatnot is they hate the 20th century
Yeah.
because in the 20th century, women got the right to vote. Women were able to not have to ask permission to get a credit
Hmm.
card, which was crazy. That was only 50 years ago. The Voting Rights Act gave representation to Black and Brown communities. Queer people, gained rights. Trans people became more accepted, and now we're seeing that's going back. But trans healthcare became more accessible. Gay marriage, all of these things happened, and now they're rolling all of that back. And I just thought it was a really interesting take that like the 20th century gave us labor unions
Yep.
and things like that, and now they're just wanting to dismantle all those decades of work. It's just really astounding.
No, it really is. And to hit on the point that you brought up a moment ago, the fact that Montgomery, Alabama is quite literally where the civil rights movement began. So much of what people in this country can benefit from rights wise stemmed from the single street in Montgomery, Alabama. And whenever I'm home and I have friends with me or anyone, I'd like to give them a tour of Dexter Avenue because Dexter Avenue is where the march from Selma to Montgomery ended. On one end of it, you have a fountain, and that fountain is where F. Scott Fitzgerald and his wife danced in the fountain after they wrote, or after F. Scott wrote The Great Gatsby. The building next to it is where the telegram was sent to start the Civil War to Fort Sumter in South Carolina. You move up the street, you have the church that Martin Luther King Jr. was the preacher at. The basement under that church is where they did so much planning for the protests that they were having. And then you have the steps where the march ended and Martin Luther King Jr. gave his speech at the end of the Selma to Montgomery March. And then a few steps above that, you have a little star that and took his oath of office for the Confederacy of the United States. So much history happened
On that block. Yeah.
on that one street. And that is where people got their rights. And it's the same street where people are losing their rights. That imagery, that symbolism, it
Yeah.
is, I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time that we're in. But as history shows, it really sucks to live through history. But
Yeah.
as history show, yeah, right. But as history shows, you know, authoritarianism and these things that are happening tend to, not win out in the end. It just sometimes takes a really long time. And the truth of the matter is with what is going on, it's going to take us decades to, in my opinion, I don't, I'm not a fortune teller, but I feel like it's going to take decades to rebuild the
Yep.
progress that was made. It's going to take decades to rebuild our relationships with allies across the world because they've been decimated and we've really become an isolated state in the world.
Mhm.
Which is, we don't, I mean, just in every part of it, we're spending billions of dollars on ballrooms and painting, the memorial pool and putting gaudy, like shitty looking gold things on the White House when people are, the price of gas in some places is $8 a gallon, but the minimum wage is $7 an
Yeah.
hour. People can't afford to live. We're supposed to be the wealthiest country in the world, but we are very low on the list in terms of healthcare, in terms of education. We have the highest um, maternity, death rate, especially among
Yeah.
Black women. Um, so like they keep saying "Make America Great Again," and I'm like, what's so great about it?
I'm really happy that you bring up the maternal mortality rate because I just had Kiara Bridges come on the podcast 2 weeks ago, and she's written an amazing book called Expecting Inequality. She called out Senator Josh Hawley in a Senate
Oh,
Judiciary Committee hearing years ago, protecting trans youth. And she talks about how America has the solutions to cure, to solve the maternal mortality rate, but yet we're actively not doing the things needed to protect these women. And so at this point, their deaths are a policy choice. And so I'm really happy that you brought that up because I like tying the loop in other episodes when they come up and they're
yeah.
relevant in this conversation. But so much of what we're talking about is our history. And before we get into your advocacy work that I want to focus on, I do want to talk about our history because being in Alabama, there are a lot of gay Republicans. And I feel like gay Republicans refuse to learn their history. And I want to take this as an opportunity to talk about the importance of understanding our history as we enter into Pride Month. I think this is a great time to be reminded about why knowing our history is so important in doing the work that we do. And as I said, there's a lot of gay Republicans who refuse to learn their history. They think that the government isn't coming after them. But what we see time and time again is that what people call us the alphabet. When the government or politicians come after one of the letters, it's an attack on the entire community. And there's a lot of people who refuse to acknowledge that. It's a privilege for them to think that these laws don't impact them when the government has shown time and time again they'll start with one group and then they'll go after the others. So I just want to ask you, why does understanding our history matter? Why is that so important in this moment that we find ourselves in?
Well, our the LGBTQIA plus history it's complex, and I think for those people that you're talking about who are gay Republicans or the ones who only want the LGB and not, supporting
Hmm.
our trans and non-binary and uh the leopard will eat your face.
Yep.
That saying. And just because you're gay doesn't mean you can't be a racist or misogynistic or bigoted. And we see that within our community a lot.
Yeah.
And so these gay Republicans, I think that again, I'm not a gay Republican, but from what I gather, their viewpoint is they're not going to come for them because
Yes.
they're MAGA, and but that's privilege to think that way, and it's racism and it's transphobia, ingrained, and it's misogyny, like ingrained in people. And but our history, queer history, is, the first drag queen, the first known drag queen in the US was William Dorsey Swan, someone from Maryland who was
Mhm.
born into slavery, and in their freedom, with two of their siblings, two of their brothers, started in DC underground balls, and they called themselves the Queen of Drag, and they provided a safe haven for primarily Black, formerly enslaved people to dress up and be queer at a time when it was illegal to be queer. It was illegal to wear clothing of the opposite, like, gender assigned at birth. It was illegal to be Black. And they are who started that. And so I guarantee you, a lot of those gay Republicans love to turn on Drag Race or love to go to
Right.
a gay bar, whatever. But they don't know that that all is because of somebody who was born into slavery.
Yeah.
And they don't know that Joan Jett Black ran for president in 1992 and 1996 and used her platform to call out the two-party system as a Black drag queen. And they don't know that, when the police, riots happened at Stonewall, it was trans women of color, and drag queens who were fighting so those very cis white gays could be protected, full well knowing that they wouldn't be
Hmm.
protected.
Yep.
But they knew, that they had to fight for what was right. And so our history is rooted in 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 this. And so for the privilege of those people, it's bigotry. And we live in a culture where, as white people, we are taught consciously or subconsciously, uh, we are taught in our country to be racist, and
Hmm.
from a very early age. And so it's up to us, whether you're queer or not, to become anti-racist. And what that is unlearning the behaviors that the system has ingrained in us. The
Yep.
system is built to tell us that we are better, and that is not true.
Yeah.
We are not better. And so it's up to us to not just say, "Oh, I'm not racist," but practice anti-racism. And I think that applies to queer people as well, because we see in our own community, racism and transphobia and misogyny.
One thing that really gets me going is when someone, and I've cut out a lot of people from my life within the past year, but some people who I had a tolerance for, and I use the word tolerance very loosely, were the conservative gays. And I'm ashamed to say that, but I'm also like happy to know that I'm standing on a moral high ground right now, saying like I cut them out of my life. But to see them at a gay bar and then sit there and argue with me that the government is not, the stance that they were taking is the government's not coming after them. And I'm like, look at Project 2025. It's like literally in black and white what they want to do. Like they're gonna take our rights away. And then what do you see? You see these memos saying that trans people can't serve in the military. You see in the FBI, the memos going around trying to out gay people from serving and protecting our intelligence and our country. And it's so insane to me that these people can walk around and enjoy the fruits of the labor of those who came before us, who sweat, who bled, who fought for their ability to be stupid in a gay bar. And I'm like,
Yeah, well, the leopard will eat their face. They're coming. They're coming for everyone. Unless you are a wealthy white man.
yep,
So people are gonna fuck around and find out. And I've I've I'm very lucky. There's not a lot of conservative people in my life.
yeah, you're
But I
lucky.
don't I don't engage. I don't have time for it. I don't have time for it. And I've kicked people out of my shows that, you
Right
know,
on.
were Trump supporters. I have quit gigs because the owners were Trump supporters. And I found that out. And I was like, you're profiting off of queer people, but voting against, no, 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 no.
Nope.
Um, I have no problem doing that. I don't have time. I don't have time for
Yep.
those hateful people in my orbit.
I love that. More of that. More of that, please. What one thing that you do in New York is you serve on the New York State Democratic Party, correct? You're on a committee with the
Yeah, I'm a
Democratic
state
Party?
committee member. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. I speak to the importance of that because I feel that that is so needed and necessary in places like New York to allow people to see themselves represented on these on these political bodies that make decisions. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, it's a really unique position. It's elected by the people, but it is a party position. So like you're on the ballot with people running for elected office.
Yeah,
So it's technically an elected position, but you're through the party, for the Democratic Party. And
sure.
New York there's a lot of red parts in New York, and Kathy Hochul, our government, is pretty moderate. And
Yeah.
Jay Jacobs, who is the head of the Democratic Party in New York, is like a big, big centrist. And I am not a centrist. I
Hmm.
am not a moderate. I'm about as leftist as you can go. And our party platform in New York, so what the state committee does is we kind of shape the party platform. And I'm really, really honored to be part of the Progressive Caucus to push forth, the ideals that we are seeing working in New York City under Mayor Mamdani,
Yep.
universal child care, raising the minimum wage. We're pushing Kathy Hochul now to protect New Yorkers' healthcare because the plan she has in place in the budget will eliminate hundreds of thousands of people from getting healthcare. Um, we've seen with this pied-à-terre tax that they put forth, like that will provide billions of dollars in revenue, but we need to take it further and tax billionaires more because they're still going to be like, I always use the example when these wealthy folks are like, well, we're going to lose all our money and blah, 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 blah. Jeff Bezos, who trash, but his first wife,
Yeah.
uh, uh, she got something like $38 billion or
Yep.
something in her divorce settlement. It was something like that. And she gave like over $30 billion away to philanthropic
Yeah.
endeavors, charity, whatever, which is incredible. That's what billionaires should be doing. But now her net worth is higher than the divorce settlement because when you have that much money, your money makes money. And so even if they're taxed, they're still going to be making a lot of but that's the whole thing, to go back to what we were talking about before. The our government that we have right now is protecting the wealthy, and they're uplifting like wealthy white people. And so all of these Trump voters, not just the gay ones but all the other ones,
Yep.
it's like
Yep.
you're directly voting against your interests. So anyway, so being part of the state committee, we work to shape our party's platform, and so right now we're really pushing to make sure that our legislatures in our budgeting go against the governor and protect people so they stay on health care, um, taxing billionaires because the pied-à-terre tax, as you saw, we had a $12 billion deficit in New York, and
Yeah.
now it's done. And the mayor has really shown that the government can work for the people.
Yeah.
And I think, Mike Johnson just said in an interview the other day, there's Mamdanis popping up all over the country. And he was saying it like it was a bad thing. And I was like, this is great. That's great. That's great. That's great because it's giving people hope and showing that there can be revolutionary change. But it will take leaders who aren't bought by corporate interest.
Yeah, and it's really I'm happy that you bring that up because the energy from the mayoral election in New York truly has bled across state borders. Like even here in Alabama, there are thousands of Democrats who are like, if it's possible in New York, you know what, we're not gonna stand idly by and we're not gonna settle. And they are even louder and more organized than ever before. And it's because of what y'all are doing in New York is giving places like Little Red Alabama the power to speak out against the hardships and the harms that the Republican Party has been putting on its people for decades at this point under their supermajority. So we owe you a great deal of thanks for the work that y'all are doing
But
up there.
thanks. But we're seeing those wins. Like there was the congressional special election recently in New Jersey, and there's
Hmm.
all these elections, like you said, happening across the country where more left-leaning, socialist-leaning electeds are winning, and it's because people want change, and they're also seeing that change take effect, and how it has in just a few months improved New Yorkers' lives.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I also want to touch on another thing besides the state Democratic Party that you're involved in. I want to talk about the panel that you moderated at the United Nations. I think that is so fucking cool that you did that. Like, how did that come to be? What was that experience like? That is crazy.
So I got my friend Fabrice used to work at the UN, and he had invited me to a discussion on gender equality across the world, and I like asked a question during it and whatever. And then after that, I was invited to put together a panel on queer electability around the globe. And that was really exciting to put that together and to moderate it. And I got to have, Brian Sims on the panel, who, he was a state legislator in Pennsylvania and ran for lieutenant governor there. And he's a very dear friend of mine. And Cecilia Gentili, who has since passed away, but trans icon. She was very involved politically. She also was a huge advocate for decriminalizing sex work, and just a brilliant, beautiful human who I miss like so much. But the panel was great, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm gonna roll up to the UN in drag and talk about queer people getting elected around the world. And it was really God, that was so long ago now. I think that was like 2018, but like yeah, I couldn't believe it. It was also one of those like imposter syndrome places where like I
Sure.
went in and I was like, oh God, I'm at the UN, and you know, uh, do I belong here? Um, and yes, I do. But
Yes, yes, yes. And you know what?
you know,
Even
it took many years after that experience to be like, yeah, no, yeah, yeah, that was, yeah, yeah, you did that.
I mean,
you know,
it's almost to me revolutionary. At the even if it was 2018, it's the fact that you did it so long ago that you have been that visible, that that work has been recognized and in front of the UN at that point in our history, and that you're still doing the work since then. Because, and I just want to read a few facts here. Just in 2025 alone, there were 850 more than 850 anti-LGBTQ plus bills. That's the most in U.S. history. And for reference, in 2020, there were only 100 bills across the U.S. that were submitted for consideration in state legislature. So that's an 8 times increase. It's just the scene where we are in our history right now, but knowing that you were doing things like being present and visible in front of the UN well before this, like really shows that we have a strong foot and strong soldiers in this fight.
yeah, well, even one piece of legislation is one too many, you know?
Mhm.
Any legislation that discriminates is one too many. And it has risen because the hateful rhetoric that is coming out of the White House, it trickles down. But we also know 72% of Americans support trans people. And this bathroom nonsense is not top of mind for them. What's top of mind for them is gas prices and being able to afford their rent and putting food on the table for their kids, and how are they going to get their medication. And so it's all just, it's a small group with a very loud voice that continues this discrimination. And but it does put people in harm's way. There was just a trans person who was killed at a university a couple days ago, Um, so what happens legislatively not only has legislative impacts, but it has impacts in how people treat people.
Yep.
And
Yep.
uh, yeah, but doing that in 2018, it was during the Trump's first administration, and yeah, it felt pretty badass to go to the UN in drag and have one of my favorite, people, Cecilia, on the panel, who was trans and from Argentina, and
But I put this in the show notes for you in prep, because I think it's such an important point to point out this Pride Month specifically with everything that we see going on in our country right now. When we look back at Stonewall in 1969, the Stonewall Inn uprising. And by the way, 2 summers ago, I lost my favorite pair of glasses at Stonewall. So if you go there anytime soon, if you can like check lost and found for me, that would be great. Showed up with them with photos. They're on my face. Photos after the fact, they're gone. So please. But no, you look at a timeline of the history of America and the Stonewall uprising, 1969. You look at the smallness of the blip on a timeline of what is the LGBTQIA plus movement, our fight for our rights. It's such a small blip in the grandness of that American history timeline. And I feel like the smallness of that blip really shows the fragility of our rights. They have spent more time trying to erase us than they have protecting us. And not enough people are talking about that. Not enough people are bringing that in the conversation to show like our rights are fragile, and they have spent so much of that time trying to erase us.
And our country is not very old. We're at the 250th anniversary, but it's not very old. Stonewall was not that long ago.
No.
The civil rights movement was not that. Ruby Bridges is still alive. Ruby Bridges, the little girl who had rocks thrown at her because she was the first Black student in a school that was integrated. She's still alive. Miss Major just passed away last year, but she was instrumental in the queer movement. Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, like they, Marsha died in the 90s and Sylvia in the 2000s, but like that wasn't that long ago, And if you think about it, like Stonewall took place roughly 100 years after the Civil War. That's not a long period of time. And so there's this short window in our country's history where people started gaining rights. And this goes back to the thing I said about Joy Reid. There's that short window of equality starting. And I say starting because, we still had a long way to go. But, and now they're just trying to strip all of that back. And when they say make America great again, what they mean is where women are barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen, queer people, gay people, trans people are given conversion therapy. It's where Black people don't have voices in government and are discriminated against. It's where immigrants are, you see what's happening with ICE.
Yeah.
And that's what they mean when they say make America great again. They mean make it a white supremacist nation. And so we have to keep fighting back and pushing back against it.
With everything going on, a theme on this podcast and so many episodes is the importance of getting involved locally. There's so much being thrown at us. It can feel overwhelming to know where to even begin. But you're looking at that and it's national news. It's like, how do you make a splash nationally with how fast things are throwing at us, how fast the news cycles are changing? But we have a lot of power to change things locally. And those are the laws and the things that we will feel on the day to day. And one reason why I'm so happy that you came onto the podcast is because you fit that theme perfectly. You started the Hell's Kitchen Democrats. And I feel like with your work with that organization, with that group, it really fits this idea that the power is with you and what you can do locally to impact your community in a positive way. So I just want you to talk about that experience. What need did you see that you were filling when you created that group? Well,
I've always said, I'm a big believer that local politics is the bedrock of democracy. And to go back to talking about Mamdani, he filled like 100,000 potholes across the city. And that might seem like okay, no big deal, but that is a big deal.
Yeah.
Like that is a big deal. That is something you're seeing in your day to day. Potholes are a nuisance and they're awful. That is something happening day to day. Our garbage can system is going to change in New York. That is a day-to-day thing that impacts
Can I
our.
interject real quickly about the potholes? I got my master's in public administration, and I always talk about, you want to talk about economic development, build a sidewalk. That's economic development. When it
Yeah,
comes to
well, they're
potholes,
rebuilding the center. Yeah,
when it comes to
sorry.
filling the potholes, it's showing that you value what you're spending your money on. You have a car, you worked hard to pay for that car. Potholes make you do more maintenance on your car, lessens the value. Like just the act of filling a pothole shows the value that our politicians have on us as individuals. So like I just have to put an exclamation point on the importance
It's
of something as small as filling a pothole.
100,000 potholes filled. They're expanding bike lanes. They're expanding sidewalks. Park Avenue is going to be turned into a park. Like, these things that are hyper local, but really do make change. And I also, I tell people local politics is important because these city councils and town councils can go against what's happening nationally, like in their communities. And school boards are incredibly important because school boards determine what our curriculum is,
Yep.
and we need to have curriculum that teaches Black history and Indigenous history and immigrant history and queer history and protects students. And school boards are incredibly important. But in founding the Hell's Kitchen Democrats, I really saw this need for infrastructure on the local level that wasn't there. There was like a void, and people were so scared and angry about Trump and needed a place to funnel that. And so we started the club, and it was, I'm the founding president and the founder, but also there was a group of neighbors who kind of, like, when the call to action went out, like really came together and became founding members. And now it's one of the most like powerful political clubs in the state, which is crazy. But it's bringing people together locally, and it's helping. And it's not just, like we support candidates and do all of that and go to protests and rallies, but also like we help our tenant associations and our block associations and our local businesses, because that is important. When your local businesses are thriving, the community is thriving. That's economic, that's jobs,
Yeah.
that's when your tenant and block associations are getting their needs met, potholes, trash, whatever, uh, that helps. And then supporting tenants when they're going against landlords who are corrupt. So yeah, I'm really proud of that, and I'm really proud that the club is still going really strong.
What I To go a little bit deeper into that, what are some of the markers of success that you're finding with the club? Like when you look at the overarching idea as to why you created the organization, what are some of the like the tangible things that y'all have been able to, like, you see when you walk down the sidewalk in New York City, you look at something, you're like, that was us.
Well, I see like a lot, like politically, and how we bring candidate forums to the community, which is really important. So
Hmm.
and hold town halls within the community, and I think that's really important, where people can have their voices heard. But like a lot of those local things, it's our playgrounds and park beautification and our small businesses being able to thrive is because our club has been such advocates for those
Yeah.
things. And so I really love getting to see those things and advocating for expanded bike lanes and sidewalks, and that's the club members working with our electeds to get that done, which is really exciting.
I want to commiserate on something with you for a moment because you ran for city council in New York City, what, in 2021? Is that right?
Yeah, 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 it's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I ran for Montgomery City Council in 2019. So
Oh,
I completely understand what it's like to run for local office. What was that experience like for you? What did you learn from it?
exhausting. Ah, it was exhausting. No, but I mean, it was exhausting. But
Yep.
I also, I said throughout the campaign, like, obviously the goal is to win, But you also have to look at the wins within the campaign. And there was a thing, like an article that came out after that said, like, Marty Cummings' failed attempt at city council. And I was like, I don't think it was failed. Like, we didn't win, but I don't think it was failed at all. And
Hmm.
because there were lots of wins, we had a primarily queer, non binary, trans staff. Everyone on our staff fell into the umbrella in one way or another, LGBTQ, IA plus. Um, we activated more volunteers and more donors and more in-district donors and received more endorsements than any other of the campaigns. That activated people into politics in a way they never had been before. That is a win. We had queer
Yeah.
people and trans people who needed a place to feel seen and safe join our campaign. That is a win. We saw later afterwards our bathroom policy of more public restrooms is a health issue. And in the largest city in the country, to only have 1,100 public restrooms across the city for 8 million people plus all the tourists, that's crazy. And now, our policy that we put forward is now law where they're building 4,400 new bathrooms over the next several years. That is a win. Uh, so, no, I don't think it was a failed campaign. I think there was a lot of wins within it, and it was extremely exhausting and emotional, but also worth every single minute.
I hate some headlines and how they frame things because I obviously didn't win my race, but I was running against a 16-year incumbent. People never, up until that point, people never had a choice to vote for someone else because he had such a chokehold on the district. And I think it's a win that I gave people hope that people for the first time in 16 years saw themselves in a campaign and volunteered or maybe donated for the first time. Like getting people engaged and activated and aware of civic engagement, that's a win within and of itself. And so,
Yes. Yes,
yeah.
because you're activating people in a new way. And a lot of my, staff and volunteers have gone on to like really big political careers, because of that. That is a win.
I
That is a
love that.
win.
Yeah, it truly is a win. What was one of the hardest things that you learned from running for office? For me, it was fundraising. I've learned I'm an awful fundraiser.
Oh, I think when you see how politics can be really gross up close,
Hmm.
that was really hard. You know, outside expenditures being spent against you for your opponent by billionaires. Um, and just how much money went into that. Like hundreds of thousands of dollars in like promo against me. I mean, I guess that means I scared them, but that's just a waste of money and resources and also just gross.
Yeah.
Um, I digress.
Well, we are in the final few questions of our conversation, Marty, and so I really want to know what is it that the listeners who are hearing us speak, learning about our history, learning about advocacy work, if they could walk away from this episode today with one thing, they have to do one thing, one action. What do you want them to take away from this and do?
I want them to get involved in local politics.
I love
Get
it.
involved. Politics is for everybody. You don't need like a master's degree or a PhD to be in politics or a law degree. Anybody, anybody, anybody can. I don't have a college degree. Like anybody can be in politics, and I think you should go to your town hall meetings and sign up to speak. You should go to your school board meetings and sign up to speak. Uh, Organize trash cleanups with your neighbors. That's community building and community beautification, and it's a great way to meet new people. Um, just get involved locally. Uh, yeah, 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 yeah.
To put another exclamation point on what you're saying, it's like we are so quick and it's so easy to lose sight that we are politics. Politics is us. Like there's no barrier to entry. And we often
Yeah,
think that you have to be
everything's
rich.
political. Everything
Yeah,
is political. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the streets we walk on, everything is political. And so get involved, like get involved, you know? And like I said, this is such like a silly thing, but like a community trash cleanup is a really good thing to do. It brings people together, it builds community, and you're doing something to help on the hyper
yeah,
local level. Having a toy drive or a clothing drive or going to a food bank, those are hyper local ways to get involved. And then of course, like signing up at the town hall and the school board to have your voices heard is really, really important. And also to let these electeds know that like their check is signed by you, by your tax dollars, and there's no reason for somebody to have a 16-year hold on a district. Like,
yep,
even if you don't win, run against them, because running against them, even if you don't win, could push them to enact policy that maybe they wouldn't have before, because they see that
absolutely.
there's several thousand people who want it, you know? So
You're
get
not wrong
involved.
about that. You are not wrong about that. And that leads me to the final question. Marty Cummings, what is it that you're not wrong about?
Okay, we're gonna switch gears real quick.
Let's do
Okay,
it.
we've been talking about real heavy stuff. What am I not wrong about? Cats the Jellicle Ball is the greatest show I've ever seen on Broadway. I've seen hundreds of Broadway shows. I love theater. I'm a theater girly. Cats the Jellicle Ball. I am not wrong about this. It is the greatest thing that has ever been on a Broadway stage. It is a masterpiece in storytelling, in dance, in costume design. It is a primarily queer cast. Uh, it's so incredible to see so many trans and non-binary people and trans and non-binary people of color on stage being celebrated. And it is exactly what we need in this time, because we talked about a form of resistance being joy. It is joy. It is joy. Like that show is a form of resistance, and it is joyful, and it is so much fun. And so if you get a chance to come to New York to see it, go see it. And I'm not wrong about that.
I
Uh,
I love that. We're trying to come up. My boyfriend and I are trying to come up in July to see Meg Stalter and
ah, yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah,
Oh Mary.
yeah, yep. We're trying to come make it up in July to see her in that. But I was laughing when you were speaking because you reminded me of like a memory that just got unlocked, and I've never told the story publicly, but back when Jinx Monsoon was in Chicago. She was in
Oh,
Chicago on my birthday, and so I flew up to stay with my boyfriend. My best friend and I came up to go see Jinx Monsoon. I spent maybe like $1,000 on our 3 tickets to go see Jinx in Chicago. Um, like what a
she was great.
privilege! What a privilege is to be in a place to where we could go see her and do that. So I really wanted to have bottomless mimosas before the show, and I got completely blackout, had to leave during intermission because I was spinning, like literally my head was
Girl,
spinning. So that's one of my last Broadway memories was that Chicago show with Jinx and just being absolutely blackout, not remembering any of it. I know I was silent, so I was not disruptive at all. I was very respectful. I
well,
was
no
just in my
mimosas
head.
before you see Oh Mary. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the lesson learned is I will not be drinking ever again before I go see any Broadway show.
No, Broadway's expensive. You want to see it.
I know. I'm ashamed to say that. I know you're a Broadway lover. I know you have your what after hours Broadway show.
Yes, we had Frankie James Grande as our guest last night, who's in Titanic right now, another great show, and Emma Sophia from Jellicle Ball. So, uh, yeah, it's great. Wednesday nights, I read it.
I want to see Titanic so bad. I've been influenced. All my entire feeds have been Titanic, so we're gonna add that on
It's
onto the
really
list when
funny.
we're there in July. But anywho, Marty Cummings, thank you so much for coming on and kicking off Pride Month with us. I know it was a heavy conversation, but it was an important one to have, and I'm so happy that it was with you, and I'm so appreciative of your time today.
Thank you. Happy Pride.
Thank you.